It was exactly 3 a.m. and across the globe, air traffic controllers noticed something unusual. Air Force One had vanished from radar. No crash, no hijacking, just gone silent. No press on board, no flight plan, and no updates. The jet, usually guarded and tracked every second, had simply disappeared into the night sky. While speculation ran wild, whispers in government circles hinted at a covert journey heading south, deep into West Africa. The name Burkina Faso appeared on a highly classified list. To most Americans, the country is a blank spot on the map. But in the shadows of geopolitics, something was stirring. Intelligence agencies scrambled to understand why the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, would embark on a journey so secret, so off the books. Questions multiplied with no answers. And yet, the world kept spinning, unaware that a meeting in the dark could change the balance of global power. Burkina Faso, a landlocked nation in West Africa, had recently become the stage for a political revolution. Its leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, just 35, had stunned the world by taking power during a time of crisis and immediately cutting ties with France, expelling their troops, and rejecting neo-colonial control. While the West viewed his actions as dangerous, many Africans saw him as a hero, a symbol of the continent's awakening. Traoré refused to bow to traditional diplomacy, standing firm in his pursuit of sovereignty. His defiance against foreign influence made headlines in Africa but was often ignored elsewhere. Yet those paying attention noticed that a power shift was underway. Traoré wasn't just resisting. He was redefining what leadership looked like in a post-colonial Africa. And it was into this new, fiercely independent environment that Donald Trump would step quietly under the radar, hoping to reclaim influence over a region slipping from Western grasp. Trump's descent into Ouagadougou that night was like something out of a thriller. No runway lights, no welcoming committee, no cameras, only darkness. As Air Force One touched down with its lights dimmed and engines barely audible, a lone SUV approached. From it stepped a man in military fatigues, not suits. Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood calmly, arms crossed, watching the aircraft land. Trump exited alone. No entourage, no security detail beyond a few loyal men. A firm handshake followed. No smiles, no words. Inside a dimly lit private terminal, the two leaders sat face to face, separated by worlds in every sense. This wasn't a summit. It was a confrontation. There were no translators, no mediators, only raw intent. Traoré's guards stood outside, silent and alert. The room held tension thick enough to cut. The air was filled not with small talk but with the gravity of two divergent visions. The world outside remained unaware, but inside that terminal, history was quietly being made. Trump opened the conversation with direct concern. He questioned Traoré's decision to expel French troops, warning that such moves were pushing Africa into the arms of America's adversaries, Russia and China. Traoré listened without flinching. In response, he said, "Africa is not drifting. Africa is awakening." Trump then offered deals, huge ones. Infrastructure loans, investment packages, oil contracts, even media support to rebuild Burkina Faso's image in the West. He pitched himself as the ultimate fixer, the deal-maker who could bring prosperity. But Traoré was unmoved. In a calm, unwavering voice, he spoke of dignity, of decades of exploitation, poverty, and foreign manipulation. No investment matters, he said, if it comes with chains. It wasn't aid he wanted. It was respect. Trump leaned in, insisting that allies were necessary. Traoré responded, "We don't need masters. We need partners." That single line changed the energy in the room. No longer was this a negotiation. It was a reckoning. The silence grew heavier, yet more revealing. From that moment, the mood shifted. Trump, known for his swagger and confidence, found himself facing a leader who didn't want what he was selling. There were no pleas, no begging, only a quiet firmness from Traoré that said everything. Trump's business acumen, once a strength, seemed irrelevant. The former president had never encountered an African leader like this. Offers of wealth, power, and influence were met with steely eyes and absolute clarity. "I would rather die standing with my people than live on my knees under a contract," Traore said. No handshake followed. No smiles. Trump stood, nodded, and walked out. By 6 a.m., Air Force One lifted off the runway, disappearing into the sky with the same secrecy it had arrived. No press knew, no headlines reported it. But within intelligence circles, the meaning of that night was unmistakable. Africa had found its voice, and it wasn't asking for validation. Captain Ibrahim Traoré wasn't just another African president. He was a disruptor, a revolutionary, a product of a continent that was tired of waiting for recognition. Rising from the military, he refused to follow the playbook written by Western powers. His leadership represented something dangerous to the status quo, a challenge to the narrative that Africa must be dependent or docile. Traoré had become a symbol, a face for a generation determined to break free. He wasn't making deals in back rooms. He was rewriting the rules. Where others compromised, he stood firm. To the West, this made him a threat. But to his people, it made him a hero. And as the global spotlight began to shift, Traoré's influence spread. His decisions weren't just for Burkina Faso. They spoke to an entire continent. He didn't just lead. He inspired. And that inspiration was now challenging centuries of foreign dominance and reshaping Africa's place in the world. Trump hadn't come for symbolic gestures. He came with urgency. Sources close to the matter revealed he was deeply worried. Africa's transformation was accelerating. China and Russia were expanding their influence rapidly. The West was losing its grip. Trump, ever the strategist, understood the stakes. Africa was rich in resources and ripe for market expansion. Yet it was also slipping out of reach. And Burkina Faso, under Traoré, was leading that charge. Trump had hoped to realign things, to rebuild bridges and reassert American influence. But what he found was a closed door, not in hostility, but in principle. Traoré wasn't negotiating. He was declaring independence, not just from France, but from the entire old world order. In that small terminal, Trump didn't just meet a leader. He met the future. And that future wasn't for sale, no matter the offer. Trump had underestimated Traoré, and in doing so misunderstood Africa's transformation. As the hours passed, Trump's persistence grew. His tone became more persuasive, more calculated. He laid out detailed plans, trade agreements, energy partnerships, and technology investments that would reshape Burkina Faso. He spoke of prosperity, global markets, and a brighter future under U.S. alignment. But Traoré didn't flinch. Africa is not your playground. We are no longer for sale, he said. Those words struck with more force than any sanctions or treaties. This wasn't negotiation. This was revolution. And it wasn't just about Burkina Faso. It was a message to every nation still under the thumb of old colonial powers. Trump had entered that room expecting to win. But Traoré had no interest in playing the game. The young leader stood not just for his people, but for a new vision of Africa, one built on sovereignty, equality, and the right to define its own destiny. A quiet but firm resistance had been declared. By the time dawn began to stretch across the city, the meeting was over. Trump left as silently as he arrived. There were no closing remarks, no joint statement, no photographs. The world outside remained unaware. But inside intelligence circles, word began to spread. Trump had failed, not publicly, but symbolically, profoundly. He had tried to reclaim a space he no longer understood. Traoré had rejected him not with animosity, but with strength. The silence spoke louder than words. It was a departure not just from Burkina Faso, but from an old era of diplomacy. A handshake had been withheld. And the world had changed just a little. Trump boarded Air Force One with no fanfare. The engines fired up and he disappeared into the early morning sky. Yet even as the plane vanished from sight, the impact of what had transpired lingered. Africa had stood tall, and this time, the world would listen. Soon after, whispers of the meeting spread. African journalists and political commentators picked up the story on social media. Traoré's name trended across the continent. His refusal to yield to Trump's offers became legend. Memes, articles, and op-eds turned him into a modern-day resistance icon. The message was clear. Africa was reclaiming its narrative. Political forums lit up. Leaders took notice. Conversations began about unity, sovereignty, and a shared continental future. Traoré's voice had become more than personal. It had become collective. His stance resonated with countries grappling with the remnants of colonial systems. While the West may have ignored it, Africa heard it loud and clear. It wasn't just about one meeting in a dark room. It was about a broader awakening. The world stage was shifting. And for the first time in a long time, Africa was setting the terms. No longer passive. No longer waiting. Africa had declared its presence and its power. Back in the United States, Trump remained silent. No interviews, no statements. For a man known to dominate headlines, the absence of noise was deafening. Insiders suggest the encounter had rattled him. He realized traditional tactics no longer worked. He had come to broker control and left empty-handed. That silence revealed a deeper truth. The old playbook was obsolete. In Africa, Traoré's words continued to ripple. They became mantras. Movements grew bolder. Leaders looked inward. The era of waiting for Western permission had ended. Africa wasn't just rising. It was demanding respect. Burkina Faso's leader had shown that no deal was worth sacrificing freedom. And across the continent, others began to follow. The secret visit left no official trace. But its legacy lived on. In classrooms, in protest, in policy. The world would soon understand. Africa is no longer for sale. It's no longer a pawn. It is a player.